Hi, everyone. This week we're going to be talking about the Ramayana, and next week as well. And I'd like us to read the Ramayana with what we've read from the Bible in mind, right? So we've talked about scriptures, how scriptures work, the kinds of questions they answer, and I'd like us to be thinking about those same questions when it comes to the Ramayana. Most of you have had the experience of reading the Bhagavad Gita in freshman studies. And you may remember from what you learned in freshman studies that the Bhagavad Gita is a very short part of an immense epic, the Mahabharata. And in fact, the Mahabharata is huge. So you've read kind of this sliver of a longer epic. Well, the Ramayana is a second, very lengthy Indian epic. Basically, similarly famous in terms of how often it's used and referred to within Hinduism and within India broadly, and outside India, as we'll eventually get to. So what we are looking at is a shortened version of the Ramayana. And what I like about that is that you get a sense of the sweep of the entire thing. So there's no way we could read the entire Ramayana unabridged, or you could read the Mahabharata, right? They're just too massive. But this is a composition by a contemporary, meaning in our century, Indian novelist who has gone through and retold the Ramayana, but in a kind of shortened form. So what you get is a sense of the expanse of the whole thing, as opposed to just kind of a sliver of it. You can see this in various places. So in the prologue, he begins by talking about how this is based on a telling of the Ramayana by Kamben, who's kind of a classical teller of the Ramayana. And then there are places like on page 4 where you'll see how he's eliding and abridging the original. So there's a festival and a temple that we start off with. At one temple or another, a festival or a wedding is always being celebrated with drums and pipes and procession. Kamben, the original compiler of the Ramayana, describes every sound, sight, and smell of the country, even to the extent of mentioning garbage heaps with crows and hens busily scratching and searching them. So that gives you a sense that, the original is expansive at almost every turn, of adding description, piling on events and subtlety and detail. And you can feel at various points that our author is saying, okay, what's the main section of the story? What's important to tell here? But I always appreciate that he gives hints of where the Ramayana itself kind of is more expansive than he is. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata are part of the Hindu tradition. So the Hindu tradition is the most ancient of the kind of live world religions that we have around today. The Vedas, this kind of original, the oldest texts of the Hindu tradition go well back into the second millennium BC. So they're incredibly ancient texts. The Hindu tradition is very rich. It continues. There's commentary on the Vedas and the Upanishads, and these are very philosophical and difficult in some ways texts. And since they're so ancient, the Vedas themselves require commentary, and how they apply to life 1,000, 2,000 years later was difficult. And Hinduism faced some challenges in the form of, beginning about 400 BC, you'll have Buddhism and Jainism, these new religions that took root in India and kind of borrowed a fair amount of the kind of setup from Hinduism, but really went in some challenging directions. And so one way that you can see the Hindu epics, like the Ramayana, is as responses to those challenges, to say, here's how these somewhat esoteric doctrines and ideas can be reflected in life. And so what we get is these massive epics, which through storytelling and through all the different ins and outs of characters and from high characters, meaning high born characters, to very low characters, and gods and events, just these rich texts, they're showing how the Hindu religion could be worked out and what its values are. And that's going to be part of our challenge, is how do we go about kind of extracting from this story meaning and that sense of how the world is structured, right? The general order of existence is the language we've used from Geertz. And I believe that you'll see that the more we talk about the Ramayana, the more you'll start to see that it is also communicating a general order of existence. What is spiritual fulfillment? What is duty? How do we understand the world? How do we understand our situation in this place? These are the types of questions that we'll encounter. How do you be a good son? How do you be a good father? How do you be a good husband, wife? All these things we get images of. What is evil? What is good? It's just all of this is encompassed in the story. But as we've seen when we talk about the Bible, the power of story form is in not simply giving you a detailed fact list, but in giving you stories that you can argue about and extract meaning from. And that's the work that we're going to be engaged with for this next week and a half. Let me just start with saying something about Rama. So Rama is the hero of this story, and we're going to have a lot to talk about with Rama. I think he's a problematic character in many ways. He's I'll get into that. He's not. I don't think you'll finish this and say we love every aspect of Rama. Just a couple theological points that are important to get. Early on, this is also on page 4. We learn about this kind of dialogue up in heaven, and there's a threat to the world because Ravana, who's kind of the bad guy of the Ramayana, who ends up kidnapping Sita, the wife of Rama, he's accumulated too much power in the world, and he's an evil person, and he has to be stopped, but no mortal can stop him. And the gods on their own can't either. So Vishnu, one of the main Hindu deities, is going to kind of volunteer to come to earth and be born into the earth as Rama. So Rama is an avatar. He is the human bodily version of one of the main Hindu deities, Vishnu. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But if you go back to our book, and you'll see that Rama here has this blue skin. And if you search on the web for images of Rama, that's what you'll see. And what that represents is that blueness is kind of a way that Hinduism communicates this is an avatar of Vishnu. That's kind of his Vishnuism. His Vishnu identity is reflected in that blueness. And Vishnu has had a lot of avatars, including Krishna, who you've seen in the Bhagavad Gita. And this blueness is kind of this way to say this is marking God's presence in a visual way. Now, Rama is an ideal person for this time, right? He's dutiful as a son. He's dutiful as a husband. He does the right thing. And I would just point out that we should see him as something of a savior. This is on page 21. Vishwamitra concluded the story. You'll get to this spot and address Rama. This is what's important. O great one, you are born to restore righteousness and virtue to mankind and eliminate all evil. At our yagna, or sacrifice, I saw the power of your arms, and now I see the greatness of the touch of your feet. So Rama is something like a savior. He's come to earth to rid it of evil. He is, it's hard to find fault. He's presented as kind of a perfect person, which is why we might not like him at all points. He's presented as this perfect person and a savior, and his mission is to rid the earth of evil. So read the first 32 pages, be following Rama, and be thinking about what you make of this character. What I'd like you to write about is how place is given meaning. So if you think about one thing that religions do, is they make us feel at home in the world, right? They give us a sense of the sacred, of important space, what different spaces mean. And I'd like you to think about how this is a story that takes in features of the landscape, important features of the Indian landscape. So what I'd like you to look for is desert and the Ganges River in this reading, and how are places given meaning and value by this text. Reflect on that, and that will be your response. And I'd invite you to discuss that as a group. If someone responds to one thing and says, well, deserts are this, or the Ganges River is that, then respond to that and say something, expand on what that person has said. So you're looking about what is the meaning of desert and the Ganges? Can you get at that meaning? And then how is meaning being reflect on how meaning is being given to these kinds of geographical features. All right. Enjoy the beginning of the Ramayana.